Hello, I'm James Harvey, the professor of music theory at the College of Southern Nevada with 5-Minute Music Theory. This is the first in a small series of videos on forms of analysis that we will be using to analyze chords and music and pitches, etc. This is known as chord symbols, and it's also commonly referred to as lead sheet symbols. I'll use both terms sort of interchangeably. Now let's take a chord and use a chord symbol to determine what this chord actually is. I'm going to write here G, B, D. Now if you know your triads really well and know how to find the root, you know that this is in root position because it's already a happy snowman. G is the root, the chord is GBD, this is a G major triad. The way that I indicate that using a chord symbol is by putting a G above the staff. It's important that you differentiate this sort of analysis from the others by putting it above the staff. It's the only form of analysis that we use above the staff. Now what this G tells me is this. I'm going to put the G over here and we're going to dissect it a little bit. So the letter is the root of the chord. So because it's letter G, it's saying that G is the root of the chord. Now, since it's absent of any other sort of identifiers, there's no minor, no anything like that, that means that this is a major chord, a major triad. And it's the letter and the identifier of minor or major always refers to a triad. When we get into seventh chords, it gets a little bit more complicated. And that's really it. That's all that we need to know using this chord symbol. What it's telling you by just putting G is that this is a G major triad in root position. Now if I change a few things, like for example, I put a B flat instead of a B, this is no longer a G major triad, this is a G minor triad. So what this is now saying is G is still the root, but it's a minor triad. Now what if I invert the chord? I'm going to take the G and I'm going to put it on the top of the chord instead, now making B flat the bass. You can indicate inversion using chord symbols. The way you do it is by using slash notation. It sounds violent, but it's not really. G minor slash B flat. So what that means is that G is the root of a minor triad with a B flat in the bass. It's not telling you directly what the inversion is, it's just telling you what the bass note is, and you can determine indirectly by that information that this is in first inversion. Now what if we're dealing with a seventh chord? How about I add an F to this chord? This is now a G minor 7 chord. So the triad is G minor. Remember, a seventh chord consists of a triad and a seventh. The triad still is G minor here. Yes, it still has a minor 7, but the triad is minor, and that's what the G minor is referring to. If I add just a simple 7 there, that's telling me or anybody that's reading this that we're adding a minor 7th to that chord. So far, the information from that chord symbol is G is the root of a minor triad with a minor 7th above that root. And then the last piece of information that we need is that this is in first inversion. The way we do that is by putting a slash B flat. Now what if we have a different quality of 7th, and instead of it being a minor 7th, let's make it into a major 7th chord. So this is G, B, D, F sharp. G is still the root. The triad is major, so I don't need to write anything. We don't actually put an M. In some forms you might, but typically you won't see that M there. It's not a universal idea, but I'm just showing you what I'll be using in the series of videos to come. So that's a G major triad, and it has a major 7th. If I just put a 7, that's not enough information because that's telling me that we have a minor 7th from the root, which we don't. We have a major 7. So what I do is I use a superscript M, that little m that's up above the G and 7, because that M is not referring to the G, it's referring to the 7. So that means that we have a G major triad with an added major 7th, and B is in the bass. So what chord symbols are really useful for are telling you exactly what the spelling is of a particular chord. What they're not very useful for is telling you what that chord is doing. In fact, it tells you nothing about key. It doesn't tell you anything about function. It's simply just about spelling, which can be useful, especially when we get into advanced music and you don't really know right away what the function is. So you can identify the chords using chord symbols and then look at patterns within those chord symbols to try to identify function. Thank you.